Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you? It's a rainy day. I'm in the red car, so no pictures of the journey, I'm afraid. But anyway, I thought I'd do a video anyway because it's Wednesday today, and we don't normally do videos on a Wednesday because I'm normally in the wrong car. Anyway, never mind about that. Don't you worry about that. It's not your problem, is it? But there's been quite a bit of breaking dental news today, and so I thought I'd just go over it, and see what we think. So basically, the National Audit Office has come out with a report that says that the measures that the government proposed to fix NHS dentistry are not working. They've got signs that they're not working, because insofar as the number of courses of treatment and the number of people who visited the dentist in the last 2 years hasn't gone up. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to generate 1.5 million extra treatments. Wow. Which is what they thought they would, it would be adequate to clear the backlog, if you like. So they had four main planks to this. And it's quite instructive that today there's no mention of it in the news. I don't know whether it's because we've got a Labour government and it was a Conservative plan. Now, when I say it was a Conservative plan, that is actually to give it too much credit, because I don't think it was ever a realistic plan. I mean, there may have been some people in the Tory Department of Health who thought it was a good plan and it would work, but my cynical view of it is that it was always just a rag bag of proposals designed to sound great, because you couldn't not like them all. You had to, out of there's bound to be one or two you thought, wow, that's a really good idea. And so really, because it was announced when dentistry was in the news and it was coming up to a general election, they needed a series of proposals that were, they could go back to basically the Department of Health could go back to the MPs and say, don't worry, we've got the wolves on the job, sort of thing. We're going to get it fixed. Now, the Department of Health has got a long and proud history of coming up with things that MPs can take back to their constituents to say, don't worry, it's all in hand, it's going to be fixed. And to a certain extent, it is something that the MPs cooperate with, because they don't really, to be honest with you, most of them subcontract the job of governing to the departments, so they will, all they'll do is, if you write and say something about defence, then they'll pass it on to the Department of Defence. Or if you complain about something to do with health, they'll pass it on to the Department of Health. And what they want is they want the Department of Health to come back with a big old letter saying, yeah, we're doing 10 things, before Christmas to sort this out. And they then pass it on to their constituent, and their constituent then has to be happy with that. So it helps the Department of Defence of Health, and it also helps the MPs. And so there's this stupid synergy in this arrangement, which has persisted and existed for years. So let's not, I don't care whether you take it as a PR exercise or a genuine attempt to try and solve the dental problem. Let's just say it's being sold as a genuine attempt to try and solve the dental problem, whereas in fact, in my opinion, it is a PR exercise. So the first plank of the whole thing, turn left here, and that's just safety first. First plank of the whole thing was a series of mobile dental surgeries, dental vans, which would go round and just generally be like almost like dental ambulances. They'd be sent to centres where there's no provision, or they were going to go to schools. I don't know. I don't care. The whole point is that it's the whole point is that none of them have been commissioned, none, and it is, to a certain extent, it's a throwback to my late father-in-law was a dentist. He worked out of a caravan. He used to spend half a day at the junior schools and half a day at the senior schools, and he probably did a bit of treatment and a lot of checkups and that, but in those days things were much simpler. I'm sure there's a demand for it. I'm all in favour of taking dentistry to the people if you can, but the point is that these vans are very expensive to equip. They're very expensive to modify, and convert, and you've got to put a dental surgery in there, and then of course in the meantime we've had so much in the way of CQC's got in the way, hasn't it? I mean, you can't when I consider the amount of stress I had getting my surgery approved for CQC certificate, let alone a dental van, bearing in mind it's got to have waste control and cross infection. It's got to have it's got to plug in somewhere, isn't it? It's going to be like a camper van, really. And most school playgrounds don't have plug-in sockets and then you've got staff welfare. Where are they going to go to the toilet? If you get two blokes in to build a wall now, there's someone's round there saying health and welfare. Where's their washing facilities? Where's their facilities for getting out of the weather? Where's their facilities for making a cup of tea? So, oh God, go on then. You want to drive like a racing driver. So everyone's looked at that and thought that that's a non-starter. So that's one point really for me, isn't it, saying it's a PR exercise. Then the other thing is that they've decided that if a dentist starts working in an area that's designated as an area of special need, then they'll get a £20,000 golden hello. And I assume that it's in one block. I assume it's in one lump sum of 20,000 when they start working. But I mean, it might not be. I mean, knowing them, they'll probably say, yeah, you can have £4,000 a year over 5 years if you carry working there for 5 years. But the point is, again, there are 240 of these golden hellos. Betty, there's 240 metres and greeters in areas with no dentistry, ready to say hello with £20,000 in crisp £20 notes in their extended paws, and only one dentist has taken it up. And I tell you, you can bet your life that dentist is probably going to work there anyway, and they thought, oh, that's nice, an extra 20,000. And that's because the benefit of the 20,000 doesn't outweigh the economic disadvantage you're going to suffer working in an area where you're going to be reliant pretty much on NHS exempt patients for an income. And it just illustrates how far behind the curve the NHS are in paying for dentistry. Now, why is dentistry expensive? We've covered this before. Dentists have to have a unique combination of manual skills, fine manual skills like a brain surgeon, academic skills like a professor, and business skills like an entrepreneur. And that's why we are and deserve to be around about the top decile of earnings. But the NHS doesn't pay anything like the top decile of earnings, and so it concentrates on basically hoodwinking and convincing young dentists who don't know any better that there are other advantages to working in the NHS. Mainly that you're going to have a nice warm fuzzy feeling when you go home in the evening to your dustbin or your skip or wherever you're going to live, and that the NHS pension is absolutely fantastic. which it isn't, because I know, because I'm living on one. You know, my 800,000 pension is producing about £1,500 a month, and I wouldn't call that fantastic. I'm gonna have a bit of trouble getting through £800,000 plus interest, aren't I? At £1,500 a month at the age of 65. So the other thing, so there's various other payments, like they've enhanced the fees, I think. So, which is like a slight admission that that the NHS fees are ridiculous, and then they pay a patient premium, whatever that is, which I don't know. It's £50 or something, but it's I don't know. It must be in some way designed to compensate them for taking on patients who need a ton of work. Now, we're talking about an environment where, let's say, the average filling, not a small one, not a big one, but just average size filling, is probably going to be somewhere between 150 and £200 privately. And so that's what they're competing with. They're competing with the private sector. And I've always maintained that. They need to understand they're competing with the private sector. It's all very well, old Professor Tidman used to say they're a monopsony, and then they're the only people who are buying in their particular market, therefore they can set the fees. It's the opposite of a monopoly, where someone's selling and they're the only person selling in their particular market, so they can then demand whatever fees they like. Tidman was always completely wrong, always, on any subject, incidentally, but on this one, as with all the rest. And hello, Stephen, how are you? All right? And he said the NHS was a monopsony, which was a great word, one that I got off him, and I've always remembered, if only to explain that the NHS is not a monopsony. They're only the sole buyer on behalf of the NHS, but they're not the sole buyer of dentistry. The public as a whole is a buyer. So the number of patients seeing a dentist in the last 2 years is now only 40%, and it always used to be, when I kept track of the figures, it was all 52%, or even higher than that. It might have been 55%, and then it carried on going down and down. This is 2006, after the new contract. It carried on going down and down, and the Department of Health said that's not, it wasn't so much of a problem. But in fact, the problem is that as it goes down, let's say it goes down 1%, let's say from, 51 to 50, then not only does 1%, that 1% not get treated that year, but they also don't get treated the next year, because when it goes down from 50 to 49, then you've got 2% of the population that would have been treated are not being treated at that point. And so what you have to do is you have to look at where you are now compared to the highest point that you ever had, which would have probably in the 50s somewhere, and work out how many patients have left the NHS as a result of the changes. And there's common sense in a way if you think about it. It's only like saying, have I made things better and how much worse? And if I have made them worse, how much worse have I made them? How many people have been deterred from having NHS treatment as a result of the fact that we've changed the system, and therefore the system is coping with fewer people, and it is coping with far fewer people. We're still well down on where we were 5 years ago in terms of number of NHS patients. Now there is another couple of funny stories. There's a dentist who's lost his contract, who's complaining like mad that the NHS has pulled his contract, and we all know why they pulled. We assume, I don't know, don't have any direct knowledge of this, but reading between the lines, he's saying that he loves doing NHS work, and he'd like to go back on the NHS. If they only give him his contract back, he'll go straight back onto seeing NHS patients. And on that basis, he's recruited his MP and all these patients, presumably, who don't want to go private. And so what's happened is, because all these patients have been told to write letters to their MP, he's got his MP on side. Now, this dentist, I have no doubt, has had his contract removed for failing to achieve his UDA targets. And unlike the old days, where if we didn't reach our targets, the profession paid the money back as a whole. Under the new contract, we paid the money back individually, and it was a feature of the contract. It's not a bug. The feature was that if the commissioning authority could say that the dentist wasn't achieving his targets, then they could take his contract away from him and reallocate the UDAs to someone who's grateful to work for that sort of for those low fees. So they've nicked his contract back off him, which is, they probably think is good for them, but it's probably not so good for his patients, and certainly no good for him, because I could imagine to lose a big NHS contract at short notice is pretty, it does involve a complete rejig of your treatment philosophy, doesn't it? Your treatment provision system changes overnight. So he's made the usual statement saying that he's sorry to have lost his contract, but his NHS fees are very reasonable, and the only charges for a checkup what the NHS charges for a checkup, so there's no change there. And he's conveniently forgotten the fact that NHS checkups include X-rays and other stuff, whereas his won't. He'll be charging extra for his X-rays. I mean, he may not, I don't know, but I think he probably will. But there's a dentist who you've got to give him, he's got the cojones to front out the commissioning people, hasn't he? What he said to them, look, you're paying me, I don't know, let's say £30 a UDA, and I've only done half the UDAs, I've only done half the work. So effectively I've been getting £60 a UDA, but you're going to pull my contract. But actually I am prepared, and I have been, and I was prepared to work on the NHS for £60 a UDA. And by only doing half the UDAs, I've sort of managed to stay on the NHS. But, and I challenge you to pull the contract. And they said, all right then, hold my beer. So they pulled his contract because they think that they can place all these UDAs somewhere. They'll find someone else who will be willing to do his work for £30 a unit. And not only that, they will be insisting that he pays back all the money for the UDAs that he's done. So he's in retrospect, he's by trying to game the system, which is like not gameable. You can't do fewer UDAs than you've been contracted to do, and then expect the commissioning authority to turn a blind eye to it, because that's their big stick, isn't it? That's their big club. They were like, do as we say, or you don't work on the NHS. And yet at the same time, there's a report comes out that says the NHS dentistry is pretty much collapsed, and there's no way to resuscitate it. Well, we have discussed ways to resuscitate it, haven't we, in these little chats we have. So I won't go over it again. But needless to say, it involves just undoing everything that's been done in the past 20 years or so. So anyway, he's so they're still as far away, they're still about as close to agreeing what to do as the Russians and the Ukrainians are. So the war's going to go on, and the dentists are going to. They've set up a dental school in Norfolk. They're talking about setting up a dental school in Norfolk because it's the only area that doesn't have a dental school. And for some reason, the Department of Health thinks if they set up a dental school every 200 yards, then people will that will solve the problem. And this is the stupidity. Talk about doing the same thing, thinking you're going to get a different result. They set up a dental school in Southampton, I think. I went to the opening with that girl. What was the Secretary of State? It was a nurse, Rosie something or other, Rosie Outlook, and her she opened this dental school, and And this is all based on a study that showed that dental students tend to live and work in the area. If they've been to a dental school, let's say in London, they tend to find a job in London, because they know the area, they know the pubs, they know the restaurants, they've made friends, perhaps they've even got married, bought a house or something. So then they've taken that single fact and run with it and said, well, all we need to do then, if there's an area of deprivation, is stick a dental school in the middle of it. And then all of a sudden, the dentists are going to start qualifying, leaving aside the fact that it'll take 6 years. Although I think in Southampton was an accelerated course. They only accepted graduates to try and speed the whole thing up. Gave them a 2-year conversion course from geography to dentistry. But what will happen is the dentists will start graduating and they'll all work locally, which of course they don't. They all get trained, they're expensive things to set up, dental schools. You don't just need student accommodation, a library, a few lecture theatres and some seminar rooms. You've got a lot of dental equipment to buy, dental materials. You've got highly expensive dental lecturers to pay. A ton of nurses. They're a shocking cost. And at the end of the day, the dentists don't necessarily stay there. They get their training and then they may go straight into the private sector. If they've got any sense, they will. So, ça change, plus c'est la même. That's as they say in over the channel. And I've got nothing to report, no change, and no change on the horizon. All right, Captain? It's 9 bells. Time to go to work. Yeah, I know bells comes in 2s. All right. I'll see you later. Bye. Good afternoon. I'm on my way home. Might as well do these 2 together, I suppose. Seeing as I didn't manage to download the first one at work. I've been busy this morning. Now, are you seated comfortably? I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was this charming old gentleman who was 90 years old, and he had pain from one of his lower left molars. And because he knew a bit about dentistry, he suspected that it might need root treating. So he went to get it root treated, or say that he thought that it needed root treating, and the dentist said no. Either said no, it didn't need root treating, or they didn't do root treatments because they were a notorious surgery, or rather I should say a surgery notorious locally, and so which provides quite a large proportion of my remediation work that I do. Anyway, so what they did was this was lower left 7, so they did an MO composite in his lower left 7, and in the process of doing this MO composite in his lower left 7, they took a whopping great chunk out of the back of his lower left 6, which was fine, perfectly nothing wrong with it. Anyway, what happened was, as expected, of course, he started getting food packing down between the 7 and the 6. The pain in the 7 hadn't really cleared up, and now he's got food packing, and as it turned out, decay to add to his problems. So he went back and he politely pointed out that they'd taken out the distal margin on his 6 with their very powerful, very destructive lightsaber of an air rotor being wielded indiscriminately. And he also said that they'd done a composite and he didn't really want a composite. He was happy with a silver amalgam. So what they did was they then took out the 7 composite and put an amalgam in the 7 and a DO amalgam in the 6, Although because the 6 was not really a cavity so much as a divot, it was a semicircular in shape. And so the amalgam, which relied on mechanical retention to stay in, obviously didn't stay in because it was semicircular, and so it just went doink and fell out the back of the tooth. Anyway, so now this very nice old gentleman who's 90 years old, who knows a bit about dentistry, has now got a lower left 7 that needs root filling, that's been filled twice and not root filled, and has now got an extremely indifferent amalgam filling in it, and a 6 which was perfect when he went into the dentist and has had food packing from damage, decay, and a silver filling in this semicircular hole which has now fallen out. Now at this point, this gentleman decides, not, arguably quite sensibly, that he needs to see someone else to get his teeth sorted out. So what he does is he comes and sees old Angry, and obviously it's a very long and sorry tale of woe that he tells. So what we do is we do bite wings, and we point out that not only has he got a space underneath the amalgam filling on the 6, which we suspect, and as it later turns out, is because the 6 DO is loose in the tooth, but also he's got what appears to be some decay underneath the 7, which was probably a leftover from when he had food packing, despite the fact that he's had it refilled with amalgam since. And the fillings themselves are extremely odd in terms of shape. Most MO and DO fillings in molars and premolars are L-shaped, aren't they? They look like what's that game where you drop the blocks down and try to build a wall? They look L-shaped anyway, don't they? You've got the lock on the top and the box down the side. But they're all box, and a massive great square, massive great box shape. So having duly given him warnings that they almost certainly both carelessly exposed, or exposed anyway, I've actually took the amalgam fillings out and had a good old poke around, and the 6, it appears to me, is not carelessly exposed. I'd be amazed if it isn't. And I filled it with a glass ionomer because I then, it'd be too difficult to line and restore with composite. So fingers crossed he's actually got away with that. But the other one, which is the symptomatic one, don't forget, when we took the amalgam out of that, turns out there was a big old exposure at the front and no bleeding at all, which means it must have died, I don't know, years ago. So it's been dead. He's been dead for a while, and that's why he's got all the toothache. He's got some early periapical bone loss around the roots, the tips of the roots of the 7. So what I did was I had to take all the rubber dam off and stop and say to him, look, these are your choices. I can either fill it like I've done the other one, and we can keep our fingers crossed and possibly go back in and root fill it, or I can open it up and put some Cresafine in it on the basis that we are going to root treat it. But there's no point doing that, because if you turn around and say to me, oh, I can't be bothered, I'd rather have it taken out, then we might as well take it out while you're numb and not go to all the bother of trying to dress it and everything. And because he knows a bit about dentistry and is very dentally motivated, said he wants to, he basically said, I want to have it root treated, and that is what I went for at the very first instance, in my very first visit. I knew it needed root treating. I went to have it root treated, and now I've got a load of damage in the 6, which was a perfect tooth, which I didn't have when I went in to get the 2nd root treated, and they told me they either couldn't do it or they didn't do it, or he didn't need doing or whatever. So, I mean, can you believe this tale of woe, right? And can you believe that this guy is a dentist, right? He's a dentist. And can you believe that the practice who was treating him, who he said knew he was a dentist, have treated him in the way that he's been treated? Is it not a symptom of dentistry? I mean, I know. He only went to this other practice because he wanted to stay registered. He really honestly didn't think he was going to need any treatment. He only went there to get checkups and the odd scale and polish. And then, of course, last thing he realised, he's going to develop a tooth that needed a non-vital tooth that was going to need root filling. And then, of course, found that he'd registered with a dentist that was wholly inappropriate and unprepared to do the treatment that he needed, and probably didn't want to, because these things are all. Why would you root treat a lower left 7 if you can extract it, or why would you root treat it if you could just fill it? Because you get paid the same. Doesn't make any difference whether you do a 2-hour root filling or a 10-minute composite filling, which I presume was done privately. So instead of the NHS root filling, which he was probably entitled to from his NHS dentist with whom he was registered, and has been talked into having a £200 composite, which was not the appropriate treatment, and they've trousered some money, whereas if they'd done an NHS root treatment, they would have been out of pocket, quids out of pocket. Now I don't expect people to work at a loss, and you could say, well, why angry? How can they do stuff if they're doing it at a loss? My argument is they've agreed to do it. When you get an NHS contract, it comes with certain terms and conditions attached, and one is, and they used to call it swings and roundabouts. Chris Audrey and Barry Cockcroft, the architects of this UDA mess, they used to say swings and roundabouts. You'll make some extra profit on some things, and you'll lose a bit on some other things, but overall you'll be okay. You'll be happy. To which the dentists all replied, yes, but if I only did the things on which I make the extra profit, and by hook or by crook didn't do the things that were going to cost me money, I'll be even happier. So, and then the Department of Health wondered why everybody was playing on the swings and nobody was playing on the roundabouts. And the root treatment is a big roundabout. It's a big roundabout. It's a massive great. It's one of those ones with an organ in the middle and about 30 horses going around the outside, and a generator that needs a diesel that's running about 1,000 light bulbs. That's a root treatment on the NHS. A merry-go-round. The whole thing is a merry-go-round. But I feel sorry for this guy, I don't know him, really. I don't know him. I know of him. I mean, I've been working in Kent for so long that I've heard of his name. I don't know his history. I don't know where he's worked. I don't know when he retired. He's quite interesting to talk to about things like string-driven drills and the advent of silicate fillings or of composite fillings instead of silicate, etc. and he's a lovely old guy, and I like him a lot. Which is why I'm annoyed that he's been treated like this, you know. I don't think you should treat a dentist like this. I think if I was working on the NHS and a dentist came to see me, first of all, I think it's a tremendous privilege to be consulted by another dentist about their teeth. I think it's a tremendous privilege, and you really, really shouldn't abuse that. And what's happened is I think they've abused it. They've treated him like some mug punter. What they should have done is said to him, look, you're registered with us on the NHS. Well, I've got to tell you, between the two of us, or dentist to dentist, you really don't want this done on the NHS. You want it done, I was going to say properly, yeah, but I mean, let's say privately. Privately, because they've got more time, better quality materials, better quality lab work, etc., etc. But they can't say that because they've got this obligation on the NHS to do whatever's necessary for their registered patients on the NHS, under the NHS. But they don't want to get on this roundabout, this merry-go-round. So what do? They just do whatever the hell they like. That's what it boils down to. He needed a root filling. Now, I know I'm saying that with through the old retrospectoscope, but let's face it, this is a bloke who's been retired probably for 30 years, and he knew he needed a root filling, and he told them when he went in he needed a root filling. Now, if he could know that he needed a root filling, they should certainly have been able to double check and find out that he needed a root filling. A simple vitality test would have told them that. Plus a bit of careful listening to his complaints, you know, the sort of the grumbling pain that not really related to anything, comes on at night, worse when you lie down. You know, I really don't, I'm trying hard to find an excuse for the way they've dealt with this, and I really can't, other than the fact that they're just sort of totally institutionalized in the what's the best word for it, the sort of the perverted, by which I don't mean perverted how you mean it, I mean changed, altered, in order to fit the treatment within the fee scale type of perversion of the NHS treatment, which is so rife now and has been for the last 20 years or so. So the NHS now is so perverted that it's almost like it's run of the mill. It's expected. It's what you not at all surprised is happening. People being told they can't have X because it's not appropriate, when it blatantly is appropriate, but it's just not cost effective for the dentist to do it. So, and I don't like it at all. I really, really don't like. Hello. Oh dear me, got a big old flood going on here. I haven't seen it like this for a while. What a shame I haven't got the camera on. I'll have the camera on tomorrow. I might bring you this way tomorrow. And I hope the water doesn't start coming in my blooming floor. Anyway, yeah. So you know, I'm really sad about the way things work out. It's like you know, and it's embarrassing for me to have to explain to patients. Patients say, "Oh, you know, I've had this big, you know, I've had this tooth extracted, and I've got the same problem in another tooth, but I don't think it needed to be extracted. Can you have a look?" And I'm like, no, we can save that. And I'm constantly having to apologise for these dentists. Oh my God, where am I going to go now? And that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, dentists who do the job properly, first of all, they get landed with the problem of doing the job. Sorting out the whole fricassee. They get landed with apologising for the fact that it's, that the treatment, that the treatment that they've had is not really the treatment that we would have liked to have seen them had. And also, I mean, sometimes the patients are grateful, but I don't know why I would be grateful for having to pay to have the same thing done twice, one badly and once correctively. That's what the complaint system's supposed to be all about. This woman who I've still got hanging over my head about the full dentures because she didn't like want to wear them. I've got that hanging over my head, and yet I'm busy every day remediating treatment for dentists who never get complained about. He's not going to put in a complaint. He's not going to put in a complaint about the fact that they missed the diagnosis of non-vital lower left 7 and caused so much damage to the 6 that he ended up needing to have both fillings redone. It's just, there's no justice in the world. That's the truth. Anyway, so he came in this morning, so that's something I've been doing. But just to close on, and something that's I find quite interesting, is that I used a rubber dam on this, and I said to him, "Have you ever used a rubber dam?" Well, it was a bit impertinent, really. I mean, he's 90, not 900. So, and he said, "Yeah. I have used rubber dam." He said, "I only used it for root treatments, possibly for centrals and going back as far as primos and stuff like that." And I said, "No, I use rubber dam on everything. So, get ready to have a rubber dam slapped on." So we put on proper rubber dam on him, lower left 7654. And it was good that we did, really. But I asked him afterwards what he thought, and he said, "Yeah, it's a good idea." And it was a bit difficult to get used to. It's always what the patients say. Initially, I was a bit worried about it, but it was, after I realised that it stopped all the water down my throat and you could work on it, the other side, without bothering me, then I really liked it. So that's quite funny. That's a dentist who never had a rubber dam in his life, never had one on his own teeth, never knew what it was like, hardly ever used it really himself, and then had one for the first time at the age of 90. It was a bit too late, isn't it? A bit too late for him to start using it now, I suppose. Anyway, all right, lovely. That's my story for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.